What I could see, though, is Canelo actually taking Diego Pacheco because he's so young, trying to get him early, similar to how Felix Trinidad got Fernando Vargas very early, got him very, very young before he could really develop into what he was going to be. Almost in kind of a similar way that Canelo took Jaime Munguia.
Welcome into Boxing Scene's top stories here on ProBox TV. Well, Canelo, of course, fighting Mexican Independence Day, September 14th. The sweepstakes is who he will fight next. Should he beat Berlanga? To help me answer that question, Jimmy Smith in studio alongside, of course, Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, ESPN boxing analyst Timothy Bradley, all joining me. And it looks like unbeaten super middleweight Diego Pacheco, only 23 years old, is getting a DAZN main event Saturday in Carson against Maciej Sulecki, who is 32-2, 12 knockouts from Poland. He wants Canelo. Should he win? Big question. Will he be tested this fight? What will it show us about Pacheco? And does Pacheco have that combination of some star power but not a lot of threat in order to maybe get a shot at Canelo? That's a big question. Chris, what do you think of this fight in general? Do you think it will test Pacheco at all?
Yeah, I do. I think Sulecki is one of those guys who's been in with top-notch opposition. He's been with both Danny Jacobs and Demetrius Andrade, especially when they were closer to their absolute primes. And he's a solid guy. You know, he's 35 years old, but he's stayed in shape. He's always been in tough. I don't believe he's ever been stopped. Been down a few times, but is shown to be strong and durable. And I think in terms of experience, I think this is a nice test for Pacheco. But in terms of Pacheco and not being dangerous to Canelo, I'm not so sure about that. Pacheco is tall and long and developing very, very quickly. Is really coming into his maturity as a young man in this weight class. He's a big guy. I've been around Canelo very close. I've sparred with Canelo. I've been next to Canelo in recent years. He even went out at 168. And I've interviewed Diego Pacheco. That boy is big. He is tall. He is long. He's got big hands. He's got a big head. He's a big 68-pounder, and he's only maturing and becoming more mature and stronger at the weight. So I wouldn't say that he's not necessarily that dangerous. What I could see, though, is Canelo actually taking Diego Pacheco because he's so young, trying to get him early, similar to how Felix Trinidad got Fernando Vargas very early, got him very, very young before he could really develop into what he was going to be. Almost in kind of a similar way that Canelo took Jaime Munguia. I think Jaime Munguia in a couple of years is going to be a real force, and Canelo got to him early, got that win under his belt already. So it is possible that Pacheco could be in line down the line, but he can be a very dangerous opponent.
Yeah, and what I meant by dangerous is he's very young, only 23 years old, comparatively inexperienced, especially at the elite level. Paul, you've been critical of Canelo's choices of opponent before. What do you think about Pacheco's chances to slide in, as Chris says, maybe in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I'm going to push back a little bit. I felt like Trinidad going up to 154 was a little bit shaky because he had pretty much gotten robbed Oscar De La Hoya of the decision in their fight, and then went up to 154. Vargas was a 154-pound world champion in the IBF, so it was more so looked at also. Obviously, looking back in hindsight, it's Vargas getting it too early, but in foresight, it was Vargas trying to get a big scalp on his name, who was maybe starting to teeter a little bit and hadn't looked good at the end of his welterweight run. And then obviously we know how it turned out. With this situation, Pacheco has no title. He's never won a world title. He's got no championships to speak of, and Canelo has no reason to really look for him if he's dangerous, if he's looking good. The interesting thing about what Trinidad did with Vargas was actually looking good, and it was a world champion. Pacheco's been looking good. I think Pacheco has a chance if he looks somewhat beatable against Sulecki. And obviously, we know Sulecki has the best days at 160 pounds. He's never been stopped, as the champ mentioned. Chris, you just mentioned that. And really, he's a guy who can sort of test you a little bit. If Pacheco blows him away, there's no shot he gets into consideration for a Canelo fight. There's nothing to bring to the table. He's just a young hot shot coming up the ladder, no championships to speak of, like I said, and he's looking too good. He's already been looking good before this. If he looks at like a guy who, okay, once he's stepping up to this, you step him up to the Sulecki level, he's already starting to struggle and show deficiencies, then you're starting to get into the picture where, you're getting into Canelo's wheelhouse, where, you start to become eligible for a Canelo fight. Yeah, at this point in time. So, I guess it's really going to come down to, does Pacheco obviously want to look his best to keep promoting himself and keeping the momentum behind him and the rightful momentum he's had in his career, the hype and the being talked about. But in the case of getting a Canelo fight, yeah, you want to put yourself in the sweepstakes. But I think you can kind of see the way Canelo is riding since the Bivol fight, and that is to not really to just kind of steer clear of these difficult fights. I mean, I gotta take the side of Turki Al-Ashik in the case of the decisions Canelo's made opponent-wise since the Bivol fight, if we really look at it. So he's continuing to do so. We'll see how Pacheco looks. I'm curious. I like Diego Pacheco a lot. He reminds me a little bit of when we first started seeing Zurdo Ramirez. These guys, these Mexican fighters that didn't come so big before. At 168, Zurdo came in and was a sort of a terror to deal with, and Pacheco is a terror to deal with as well at 168. And I think he could continue to keep growing. He's a big 168, as is Benavidez. He basically has all the tools that a guy like Canelo probably doesn't want to see if he keeps looking the way he has.
Well, also, when you look at, you brought up Benavidez, who left the weight class for 175, maybe out of frustration of not getting a Canelo fight. That leaves room for the next big name, the next superstar at 168. Tim, in your opinion, could Pacheco be that guy?
How many years we talking about? I mean,
let's say 2 to 3. 2 to 3 years, let's say.
2 to 3 years.
The foreseeable future, 2 to 3 years.
If he even can make 168 that long, right?
I don't know. He might be at the 175 by then, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. He's young.
23 years old. He's probably going to outgrow the weight class. However, if he was to stay in the weight class, I would say possibility. If Canelo was to retire, yes, I would say he definitely has a good chance, because when you look at the 168 weight class and you look at the fighters that they have, Mbili, I think Mbili right now would be a little bit too strong, a little bit too much for Pacheco right now. But in 3 years from now, I think he'll be perfect. I think he'll be able to box, understand how to control his range and distance. See, Pacheco, his last fight, he didn't impress me. He had a smaller guy in there, very athletic, that was able to dart in and dart out on him. His feet seemed a bit slow. He seemed like he was out of sort in spots, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? He's not ready yet. He's not ready yet. So to even mention his name in Canelo, absolutely not. Canelo will run through him. No problem. I think that as of right now, the guys that we see at 168, I think Canelo beats all of those guys at 168. Now, I want the guys that moved up to 175, they may have had a chance with Canelo. Benavidez for sure, and the other one,
David Morrell.
Morrell as well had a damn good chance at competing against Canelo. But as far as the landscape right now, a lot of pressure guys, a lot of guys that have some punching power, but put pressure, but not a whole lot of boxing ability. And that's what Pacheco brings. He brings boxing ability, but he has to continue to get better over the course of time.
Of course, for the next 2 weeks, it is Canelo Alvarez, the biggest story in boxing. More news about him. And, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, real quick. Let me clarify.
Please.
I know, Champ, you pushed back on my statement about Fernando, but you guys both actually made my point. What I meant by getting him young is before that fight could, marinate the way we make these fights now. If that was happening now, they would have made that fight into some huge mega fight. It would have took years to happen. No, they went right to it. And that's what I mean with Pacheco. Pacheco in a couple years is going to be dangerous. But, just like Tim said, if he fights him now, that's a Canelo fight all day. That was my point, not so much that there wasn't a reason.
I think it's gonna come down to the way he looks against Sulecki. I think that's gonna go a long way in seeing whether he gets consideration or not. If he looks a little bit susceptible, your case becomes a very strong case, because Tim says okay, he hasn't. I don't like the way he looked in his last fight doing this or that. And you're saying, okay, you know what?
That was the McCallum fight. Well, that guy's tricky.
If he can sort of look like that again, either by design or not, Canelo may consider him. And it's a sellable fight, two Mexicans.
And right now, you're looking at fighters like Mbili. You're looking at. You made a good point. Last week, Paulie, about Janibek possibly being in the Canelo sweepstake if he moves up from 60. Just like a random guy comes in who's got a good record, former unified champion. Yeah. I mean, that's a very possible fight too. And then you got a guy like Pacheco. So you've got these names circulating that Canelo's going to have a choice of, because Canelo always has his choice. So all that talk about him going up to 75, I don't know, we'll see.
Well, it's about Canelo, of course, being the major story in boxing for the next couple of weeks. And here at Top Stories, you get all your boxing news. More to come.
Wednesday Night Fights.
Dynamite action on Wednesday Night Fights every other Wednesday on your boxing channel.
Coming up on your next Wednesday Night Fights, September 11th. Rising Guatemalan star Lester Martinez puts his O on the line against fellow undefeated warrior Joe Showtime James. Live from the ProBox Event Center in Plant City. Get your tickets at proboxtv.com or take your chances at the door. Wednesday Night Fights.
For more ProBox TV, scan the QR code on the screen or go to the App Store and Google Play. ProBox TV, your boxing channel.